So, as I said, it's the first week of Lent. Time is running away, isn't it? Don't you think? Or maybe you don't. It seems like this year is running along very quickly to me. But maybe that's just a sign of age. I don't know. I'd like to. I'm going to bring you a reading from 2 Corinthians. But actually, do you know what? Before I do that, we're kicking off a new series this week, as you will probably imagine, because it's the first Sunday of Lent. And this year we're going to follow a theme. I sent out the details to you, but it's called Drinking from the Cup of Life. We're going to be remembering what it means for us to be human beings, because sometimes I think we forget, actually, that that's all that we are. There's far too many people in the world today, I think, with Messiah complexes, aren't there? There's only one. The rest of us are human beings, and sometimes we need to grasp more fully what that actually means. But we're also, in all of this, going to be remembering and being able to see how God refreshes us, and God keeps us, and God sustains us in all of our journeying with him. And to help us to do that over this season of Lent, what we're going to be thinking about is some of the images that we have in our Bibles of cups and vessels. And we're going to use them to explore aspects of our relationship with our Heavenly Father. So if that doesn't make sense, hopefully by the time we get to Easter, it will have made some sort of sense to you. All right? So this morning we think about the broken cup. We think about a broken cup, a broken vessel, as we have a reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 to 11. And it says this: For we do not preach ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, I wonder how many of you watch this on the telly. Hey? How many of you watch this? Yeah, a few hands going up. Is there anybody that hasn't got a clue what this programme is? Some people obviously do live on a different planet. Hey? Wow. This is The Repair Shop. The Repair Shop. It's one of Ian's favourite programmes, this is, which is great because it's not a bad programme to watch, but it is bad when you have to keep watching reruns of it. Just thought I'd put that out there. Anyway, it's the kind of TV programme that you sometimes need to watch with a few tissues handy, to be fair. Because basically, for those few people that don't know what it's about, what happens is people have these much-loved items that have seen much better days. And they take them along to this group of very highly skilled people, skilled in their craft, who use all of their expertise to mend the said items, to fix them and to restore them. And the truth is really, I suppose, that some of these items aren't really very valuable in monetary terms. You know, you do look at it and you think, well, that's a bit of tat when they hand it over. You do. Well, I mean, I do. All right, I do. I look at it and think, for heaven's sakes, well, that should have been in a bag long ago that was labelled rubbish. But the thing is that some of these items aren't very precious in money terms. But they are precious beyond what money could buy to those who bring them in for repair. And the stories behind some of these items are really incredible to hear, even the ones that do look and quite honestly are rubbish. The stories behind them are really interesting and incredible to hear. And then you have the reactions of those people when they come to pick up the restored item. And that's when you need your tissues, because it's quite, they're tear-jerky moments. But more often than not, as these battered, falling to pieces items are handed over for repair, the experts ask a question. And it's normally this: what is it that you would like us to do? Which is a funny question to ask, because you think they've brought it to a repair shop. I mean, I'm from Norfolk and I can work it out. But you see, what they really are getting at is this: what would you like us to do? The reply to that question is never, I have never heard anybody say, could you please make it look brand new and perfect? Could you please make this item look like it's never been used, it's never been taken out of the bag or the box? Could you please make it just like it was when it came off the production line, except most of them probably were pre-production lines, but you get my drift. Nobody ever asks for them to be made completely perfect. Why? Because these items have lived. I'm not talking that an inanimate object has started talking to them. I'm saying these items have had a life. They've had a life. And that life has marked them. And that life has broken them. And that life, in many cases, has completely damaged them in lots of ways. And in many ways, all of those things make that item all the more precious and all the more valuable to the owners, because you see, these items tell a story that is unique. It's a unique story that deeply connects the item not only with the past times and the lives of those who'd owned them, but with the people who have them in their hands right now. And there is something very powerful about that. Very powerful about it. And I can't help but think about this programme when I come to this passage in 2 Corinthians 4 today. All about treasure in jars of clay. Now, the background to this piece, because what I don't want to do is just pull passages out from the Bible and go, oh, it fits very nicely. The background to this passage is one that finds the Apostle Paul, who was writing it, because he writes this letter to the church in Corinth, in a little bit of a difficult time. He's being marked, hurt, damaged and broken, shall we say, I think. He's being got at and hurt by those within the Corinthian church who've been influenced by the challenge and the lies of false teachers. These teachers who profess to be those who are all about the work of Jesus, led by the Spirit in the church, are calling into question not only Paul's personal integrity, but also his authority as an apostle. And these false teachers are seeking to hold some power within the church set up. And the way they get to it, the way they get to do that, the path they take to get hold of this power is that they big themselves up. They start telling everybody that they're really the ones that are hearing from the Lord. They've got a hotline to God. They're the ones who are moving in the power of the Spirit. Everybody else is just getting in the Spirit's way. And that Paul, he's not really all he was cracked up to be. He does tell lies, He's not really to be trusted. This is what they were doing. And Paul's response? Well, we've heard a bit of it, haven't we? He simply points to Jesus. Paul says we don't preach ourselves, but rather the lordship of Jesus Christ. Because yes, we are your servants, but we're not your servants for our sake. We are your servants for the sake of Jesus. Because this God that we follow, who says, let brilliant light shine out of darkness, is the one who has cascaded all of that light into our hearts, into our very beings. And that light is the brilliant dawning light of this glorious knowledge of God that we see when we gaze on the beautiful face of Jesus. What he says really is, if you want to know and understand and see who God is and what God's doing, then look at Jesus. Listen to Jesus. Know Jesus. And then, of course, this leads him to talking about clay jars. Now, these would have been really common, everyday objects. He's not talking about the sort of stuff that your gran would have put in a cupboard for that special day, Did your grans have things like that in cupboards? The special tea service that was only for special occasions that you could probably never, ever remember ever being taken out of the cupboard? That's not that. This isn't what he's talking about. He's talking about everyday, bog standard stuff. The stuff that you buy, like from IKEA, because you know it doesn't matter if it breaks because you can go and buy a shed load more for 50p or something. He's talking about that sort of stuff. These things were everyday items. Everyday items. And if you watch the Great Pottery Throwdown programme, another one that, well, we don't need the tissues for that. It's one of the judges that breaks into tears every time he sees a bit of clay on that one. But even if you don't watch it, you will know clay pots are very fragile. They're very fragile. I mean, you barely have to sneeze and they're broken. They crack and break very easily. And this is the point, you see. This is the point that Paul's making here. As human beings, we are not strong. As human beings, we are not perfect. As human beings, we are fragile and weak. We get chipped very easily, and lots of us have big chips on our shoulders at times, but we get chipped and broken and cracked very easily. And yet, in spite of that, God has poured his love out for each one of us and is willing to fill us with this love too. The treasure here is Jesus. His life, his death, his resurrection, and the mission to let everybody know about it. As human beings, we are fragile. Fragile, just like clay jars. And yet God chooses us. In spite of the imperfections and the weakness and the fragility, God chooses us as vessels to carry the life of Jesus with us and in us. You see, the fragility and the brokenness of our humanity are mirrored in the sufferings of Jesus on the cross. In the story of Jesus' life, death and resurrection, we see God works in very, very unexpected ways because everybody was expecting someone strong, someone with massive authority, some really powerful king and ruler who would just overthrow the powers of the time and make life easy and comfortable for everyone who believe and follow. But what actually happens is that Jesus comes along and he's born into poverty and he's born into fragility. He's born into uncertainty and troubled times. Jesus comes along and he's completely misunderstood and he is abandoned by friends and he is mocked. And he is a victim of injustice and he dies a cursed death. He's crucified. You see, what we actually see is God working through what is broken. Utterly broken. The American preacher Vance Havner said, God uses broken things. It takes broken soil to produce a crop, broken clouds to give rain, broken grains to give bread, broken bread to give strength. And I might add to that, and the broken body of Jesus to give all humanity hope. God uses broken things. And this means that in our suffering, Jesus is with us. In our brokenness, Jesus is with us. In all of our feelings of abandonment and of injustice and of pain, Jesus is with us. But let's remember that Jesus was also raised from the dead. Jesus also was the one who overcame suffering. And just as Jesus is with us in our suffering, we too get to participate in the new resurrection life of Jesus. That's what verse 10 of this passage said. You know, verses 8 to 9 describe what it looks like. Even though we are broken, and he talks about being hard-pressed and perplexed and struck down, God repairs us and doesn't let our brokenness define us because we are not crushed. We are not in despair. We are not abandoned. For the life of Jesus to be made visible in and through us, our clay jars in the hand of God are repaired to be made, well, are not repaired, should I say, to be made to look as though we've never lived. Our lives, our clay jars in the hands of God, are not repaired to be made as though we've never, ever lived. Like we've never, ever come out of our packaging. Like we're all fixed and smooth and perfect. Like we've never been broken. Holding the life and the death of Jesus together in our bodies at the same time means really that we have gold seams within us. A bit like kintsugi. I don't know whether you've come across this. Maybe you have. I think it's become a little bit more widely known in recent years. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by mending areas of breakage with a lacquer that's dusted with or mixed with gold, powdered gold. So it treats breakage repair as part of the history and the story of an object rather than something that you've got to hide and disguise like it's never happened. It was never broken. We'll fix it to make it look like it never was broken. It doesn't do that. It draws attention to the break and the damage in a way. And it often means that the repaired item can seem to be far more beautiful and far more individual and far more precious than it was before it was even broken. The all-surpassing power of putting us back together and creating life from within brokenness and death belongs only to God. And seen in this light, the clay jars of our lives, broken and repaired, are evidence of God's work in and through us. And that work should be seen and can be seen, I think, as gold seams. Gold seams that tell the story that we can trust that no matter what happens to us, God never abandons us. The story that gives hope that in the face of death and suffering, in the moments when we can be overwhelmed by our own weakness and fragility and brokenness, that life and love is still and will always be at work in us. The light, remember, always shines out of the darkness. Paul says that in verse 6. At the beginning of this season of Lent, as we follow this theme of drinking from the cup of life, we start with this understanding that the cup of our life is like a clay jar. It's fragile. It easily gets broken, cracked, chipped. And our reaction to that might be that we hide that bit away, that we feel like we can never really be made perfect or whole again because of what has happened, when in truth none of us are actually called to be perfect, but we are always encouraged to be open and to be available and to be ready to allow God to do what only God can do in and through each one of us. So on our journey through Lent, as we start it this week, it starts really with me asking you whether you know within yourselves today the places where you feel pressured and stressed, places where you simply do not know what to do, places where you know you feel broken, a bit broken, places where you need the gold to be poured in. And I wonder, do you have the courage and the faith to place yourselves at the beginning of Lent into God's hands and allow God to do just that? To repair what is broken, to bring light where there is darkness and life into the places that maybe are feeling a bit dead. I'd encourage you maybe just to think about that as this week goes on. Since doing the exercises, the Ignatian exercises, I think one of the most fruitful things from that for me has been just the pattern of prayer, and particularly doing an examine prayer near the end of the day. Because it's a time when I can sit down in quietness, and I would encourage you maybe to do this because it helps you to work out sometimes what is broken or where things are damaged. At the end of the day, to sit and sort of think, where have I really known God's grace and presence with me today so that I can thank him? But where also, am I aware that maybe I could have been a bit better? Maybe I could have responded more graciously. Maybe I've done something that I didn't want to do. Maybe I've completely disobeyed what I was supposed to do. But that I can say sorry, and I can ask, why do I keep doing that? Maybe invite God's Spirit to ask why. So that I can, if you like, take a candle deep inside of my heart and life and say, God, show me the bits that are broken, because sometimes we don't know where they are. Where is it that I need the gold poured in? It's a story I came across, as I finish, a story that I came across this week. A water bearer, maybe you've heard this, it's widely available on the internet. A water bearer in India had 2 large pots, and each hung on the end of a pole which he carried across his neck. One of the pots had a crack in it, while the other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to the house. But the cracked pot arrived only ever half full. And for a full 2 years, this went on daily, with the bearer delivering only 1.5 pots of water to the house with every journey. Now, the perfect pot was very proud of all its accomplishments, perfect to the end to which it was made. But the cracked pot was really ashamed of its own imperfection, and really miserable that it was only ever able to accomplish half of what it was made to do. And after 2 years of what it perceived to be bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream. So it ain't a true story in that respect, all right? Just in case you were wondering. It spoke, this broken pot, to the water bearer by the stream and said, "I'm ashamed of myself, and I really just want to apologise to you." And the water bearer said, "Well, why? What are you ashamed of?" "Well, I'm ashamed," says the pot, "because I have been able for these past 2 years only to deliver half my load, because I am damaged and there is a crack in my side that causes water to leak out all the way back to the house. And because of my flaws, you have to do extra work. You don't get the full value from your effort." And the water bearer felt sorry for the old and cracked pot, and in his compassion, he said, "I want you to notice as we return to the house the beautiful flowers along the path." So as they went up the hill, the pot took notice of the sun warming the beautiful wild flowers on the side of the path and did feel happier. But at the end of the trail, still felt really bad because it leaked out half its load on the way, and again apologised to the bearer for its failure. And the bearer said to the pot, "You did notice, didn't you? You did notice, didn't you? There were only flowers on your side of the path. The flowers were only on your side of the path. They weren't on the other side. And that's because I've always known about your brokenness, and I've taken advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walk back from the stream, you have watered them. And for 2 years, I've been able to pick those flowers and decorate my table in the house. And without you being just the way you are, such beauty would never have graced my table." We are all like clay jars containing treasure. The master potter has given to each one of us life, and has given us, along with that life, a unique identity all of our own. And within that uniqueness and that giftedness, and at times that apparent brokenness, let me tell you, if we will allow God, there will be a rich vein of absolute gold. A gold that tells a story, that has the power to connect those around us with the transforming power and love of Jesus. I wonder, do you realise this morning that you are packed full of untold treasures? Through everything Jesus has made possible for you, God makes you ready, just as you are, to be set loose in the world, a carrier of grace, a carrier of the presence and the power of Jesus, ready to be spilled out within humanity, so that flowers are going to grow along the sides of the pathways that you walk down, that lives will be blessed by your faith, by your living, by your loving, by your brokenness. Because that's where the gold of God is seen, if you allow it to be. Where are you feeling broken today? And where are the places where you need the gold to be poured in? And in thinking about the fact that we are then loosed into the world to be a carrier of grace and ready to be spilled out into humanity, where are the places of brokenness in our community? And how might you be a vessel, a cup of God's grace into those places? Let's pray together, shall we?